Hello, you're listening to the Saluki Gamescast. This is episode 89 for Friday, August 30th, 2024. My name is Justin Young. Joining me today are Alicia Utecht, Alicia Utecht, Alicia Utecht, Utechta.
What? Now you're just adding letters.
Hey, I know so many people when they mispronounce names are like adding random letters, and you're like, there's not even a Q in that name. Where are you getting that from? Alicia, how are you doing this week?
I'm exhausted, but I'm hanging in there. We've got a 3-day weekend ahead that I'm very thankful for.
Yeah, we got Labor Day coming up, so day off we'll all enjoy. Also joining me is Mario Sanders. Mario, how are you?
Pretty good. Mostly good. Second week. Can't complain too much.
All right. Well, everybody sounds like they're doing pretty good, which is, I would say 2 weeks into the semester is better than some semesters.
Yeah. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. It's been pretty good so far this semester, and things are running decently smoothly.
Yeah. I guess all that said, even though things have been mostly good, I am very much looking forward to having an extra day off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's one of those things, right? Like when you start teaching classes, you start learning that like, oh, right, my teachers always wanted days off just as bad as we did. They were just as happy for the snow days.
Literally. We're like, please, come on, cancel class.
So yeah, it's been a pretty good start to the semester, and right, we get a 3-day weekend. There's a whole lot of holidays this semester, which is kind of weird compared to usual fall semester.
It is a weird one. I know I've got some other personal traveling, but figuring out like the second half of the semester, well, really just like the last month of the semester for my schedule was very difficult.
Well, and no, it's kind of a weird semester because like normally we have Thanksgiving break and then we have 2 weeks.
I think that was a big part of it.
Yeah.
And it's like this year we have Thanksgiving break and then we have 1 week, and like that impacted our Kleinow theater season. It's impacted how our classes are scheduled. It's just like, oh man.
Yeah, and we get a fall break this year, which is like kind of weird to be back to doing that. So I don't think we've had a fall break since I started here.
Yeah, I feel like we owe it. That would usually be replaced by like the CMST day, where it's like essentially fall break. But
It's like we do fall break, but we can't make any of the other faculty do fall break. But now we at least still are giving off that Thursday, and then the university is giving everybody Friday, so that's good.
Yeah, that'll be a nice break. All right, why don't we move into what you've been playing? Alicia, what have you been playing?
So it has been a very hectic week. I've mostly just been still playing just Pokemon Go, and then it's your fault, Justin. You got me hooked on the New York Times games.
It's all your fault. I don't know.
I thought you were blaming me for Pokemon Go, and I was like,
that one too.
how's that my fault? That's more OJ's problem.
That was before I even came to SIU at all.
Well, you started the podcast that OJ was on where he talked about Pokemon Go.
That's true.
It all comes back to Justin.
This podcast is a gateway drug.
But no, I'm now hooked on, doing connections and back on Wordle every day and playing through all the Sudokus and doing the letterboxed and all of those things. I don't pay for the subscription, so I don't get to do the normal crossword.
Do you do strands?
I do strands. Strands is a lot of fun.
Yeah. Basically a word search.
Do you have a favorite one? I know I've played a few of them, but
I think probably for me it's a tie between strands and letterboxed, just because new isn't the word, but like.
Which one is letterboxed?
Letterboxed is you get a square with 3 letters on each side, and you have to use all of the letters to make words.
Yes.
And try to use all the letters, within 5 words or 4 words or whatever.
Sorry, go ahead.
No.
I was just saying, I know the one that, I don't know what it's called, but it's the one that my mom really likes is whatever the one that has the B.
Oh, the spelling bee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess that's. I wanted to say
literally
Bumble,
what it's
but
called.
I know that's the dating app. That's a different game.
Bumble?
No, I'm joking. But I was like,
Are you playing Bumble as a game?
I knew that one wasn't the spelling bee one, but yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that one is another one that you can play. You can play so much of it, and then I think it's like once you reach the solid level, you have to be a subscriber to play beyond that.
Okay.
So I'm like, okay, I get to solid every day, and then I'm done.
I just like imagining Mario opening up the Bumble app and going, "Ha, I beat you." There's all these very confused matches with him. They're like, why is he messaging me that he wins?
Definitely not me, but I do imagine some people play it as a game.
Look, I've watched a Point Crow video of speed running, speed dating, so.
All right.
But yeah, that's really been most of it. Has just been those. Oh, and depending on the day, the tile match one is either really soothing or really irritating, because sometimes the patterns that they have in the background just hurt my eyes because they're so busy.
That one I don't think I know that one.
It's really just a matching one. So like there's like 4 different aspects of each tile. So you match. Okay, the center one is the same on this one, and then this one that I clicked on here, the background is the same as this other one over here.
I'll have to check it out. What's it called?
I think it's just tile or something like that on there.
I think the only one I really do, and I don't even do any of them on consistent, is maybe the like crossword mini.
Yeah.
But those are all such a good variety of games. I know when you had brought it up a few weeks ago, I was like, hey, I should go back and do some of those on a more regular basis. So that's cool that you've been going and doing them.
Yeah, and most of them go pretty quickly. I think the hard Sudokus sometimes take like 25 minutes, but and don't even get me started on connections. But
I love how like evil some of the categories on connections are.
So evil sometimes, and I'm like,
There was one of them that was like Muppets missing a letter in their name.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? Like, how is anybody supposed to get this?
Yeah, I think there was one a few days ago that was like sneaker brands without the ER or something like that. And I was like, how? What? Huh?
Yeah, those are just, you got to save those ones for last.
Yeah.
Like, well, these are the 4 that are left. There's something that tethers you together.
Yeah, I usually can get 2 of them, and then the last 2, I just have to kind of hope. I think I've been doing this for 2 weeks now, and I think there's been 2 days that I got all 4.
All right. So playing the New York Times games. Anything else?
That's really been it. Like I said, playing a lot of Pokemon Go, especially now that I'm teaching in another building and then have class in this building.
Nice.
So like making sure that I have my buddy up to get those candies every time that I have to book it back and forth between buildings. But it's honestly, this week was not any calmer than week 1 for me. So I'm very much looking forward to sitting down this weekend and like, playing my Switch and getting to do other stuff.
Yeah.
Nice.
And you did also announce the Kleinow schedule this week. So like that's been laid out. And that includes your show in October. Is that right?
I have a show October 3rd, 4th, and 5th that is comically close. And it's all about my family and our relationship with comic books, how really those have been... My family is one where fandom has always been part of who we are, and comic books in particular. I've spent my whole life going to like our local Comic Con and stuff like that. So really kind of diving in and exploring the relationships between me and my dad, me and my mom, me and my sister, and talking about how comics are part of that with all of them.
Cool.
That'll be fun.
It's going to be really fun. I've been in rehearsals I think we started rehearsals last week, and
can you give those dates one more time? October
3rd, 4th, and 5th at 7 p.m. We moved the Kleinow up an hour now. So.
And is that a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Friday?
Yep.
Okay. I feel like those are usually the days.
Yeah. Kleinow 3 nights are always Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
Cool.
Yeah, cool. And so anybody who's listening wants to come to that,
You can meet my family. They're all coming down.
Nice.
that would be fun. And so, I mean, that's actually good. Like, it's a show about them. So
Yeah.
hopefully there's nothing bad in it about them.
I know. I was
they're
recording. T is our publicity director for the client now this year, and he and I were recording a little bit for archival purposes and for promotional purposes. And he was like, "So are there any, what are you worried about, like, ethically?" I'm like, "Honestly, right now there's not any stories I'm worried about. We'll see if that changes, but right now I'm not worried."
Well, that's cool. That'll be fun and everything. So for people who are into, who want a good family story, but also who are into like fandom and comics, that would also be fun for them. Mm-hmm. All right, Mario, what have you been playing?
Not a ton. Actually, the one game that I have played that I started up this week that I was getting pretty close to dropping because I thought it wasn't for me, but I've decided I will give it another go is Blasphemous. The I always want to say roguelike, but that's wrong. The
Souls-like.
Metroidvania. Well, that's the thing is I didn't know if it was Souls-like or not, but so the reason I was getting close to dropping it was what I was experiencing as the difficulty. I was like, this game is good, but I'm just dying over and over and over again. And there are some games that I'm like willing to do that with. There are others I'm not willing to do that with, and I think it depends on how it feels to play.
Right.
And I don't think I was enjoying how it felt to play, but what I've learned is that I am in a section of the game that is like supposed to be later on, which as a Metroidvania, I just sort of assume if you're not supposed to be here, it will wall you or gate you in some way.
Yeah.
And
you have to know the tricks to sequence break.
And
some won't.
And this one, for this one section, is apparently this is like everybody was talking about. I think, I was getting close to messaging a friend because they play the game whenever we do like the randomizers, the archipelagos that I've talked about in the past. They typically play Blasphemous. And I was almost going to message them just saying like, is this game hard or am I bad? And I didn't because I found online basically somebody saying the same thing, that they were stuck in this area and they said, "Oh, are you in this section?" They're like, yeah, you shouldn't be there yet. Like you can go there, but if you don't have like any sort of upgrades, you're going to be miserable playing through this section of the game. And so I've decided I'll give it another few days. I'll go to the section that is supposed to be easier, but it was one of those things where I was like, it takes like 8 hits to kill an enemy and I am dying in like 2.
Yeah.
And you can't like, you can't even combo. So I'm like getting in there for 1 and then running away and then getting in there for 1. I'm like, I get that. And that's just maybe not what I expect from a Metroidvania. Maybe that's just my experience playing some of the other Castlevania games, specifically like an Aria of Sorrow, where I don't feel like you really have to do that in combat.
Outside of bosses.
Yeah, unless you're like sequence breaking in some way where you're further along than you should be, or you're under-leveled in some way. But so, like I said, I'm gonna give it some more time, go back to where people are saying I should be, and we'll see how it goes. But because I was like really disappointed because I had heard good things and I was excited to try it out. Like I said, I have this friend who really enjoys it. And so the fact that it was falling so flat to the point that I was really not enjoying myself at all, I was disappointed, but I'm looking forward and hoping that this will fix that for me.
Yeah, I feel like that's a design debate within Metroidvania games.
Yeah.
Like, how much should they hold the player's hand and sort of guide them, even though it's sort of this open world, right? And how much should we sort of gate off different areas and everything? And so, like, when you look at some of the ones that are the most beloved, like a Super Metroid or a Symphony of the Night, like they're very much are designed to sort of hold your hand down a very sort of linear path starting out in those games.
Yeah.
And you can kind of go off a little bit, but like they're very much sort of directing you. And then when you get to a game like it sounds like with Blasphemous, where it's just like, no, here's an open world. Like you can go anywhere and explore anything, but like there is a path you're supposed to go. If you veer off this, you're going to get your butt kicked. It can be really kind of overwhelming and confusing. And I've had that experience with some of those games.
And I don't know if it's totally open like that, but this one area is.
Right, yeah.
And you know, people were talking about it, and I feel like it ties into one of the conversations we were having in the video games class a few days ago, or maybe it was just a conversation you and I were having, but about like the ways that like designs historically influence the way that we play, because basically there was like a split, like a fork. You could either go up or you could go down.
Right.
And the people in this, I think it was on Reddit, people were talking about it, like, I don't know what it is, but people always want to go up.
Yeah.
And that is, you don't go up because that is like a much harder section of the game. People are like, this might be the hardest section of the game, just like based on where it fits in.
Yeah.
And if you go up first, like you're going to have a bad time.
Yeah.
Unless either A, you've played it before, or you're just like an Omega gamer, I guess. But yeah, so that was the advice that a lot of people were giving in this very old thread.
Yeah.
They were saying like, go down, go back to this section, go through this section first, and then go back up, and you'll probably have a better time. So like I said, I'll do that.
But, you know, a lot of games are sort of designed that way where you are given options of different ways to go. And if you read developers or listen to interviews with developers, they'll say, yeah, like 90% of the people go the right way. And then about 10% of the people choose this path that we didn't intend for them to go down. And then it becomes an issue of, well, do you in some way gate that path so they can't go that way, right? Or do you assume that they'll figure it out on their own? And like sometimes it becomes very clear, right? Sometimes games you wander into an area and you're like, oh, I'm not supposed to be here. Everybody's one hit killing me.
Well, even that was one of the things when Pokemon Scarlet and Violet first came out was, I mean, part of it is that they didn't level scale anything, but it's like you beat the first gym leader, you beat the first Team Star boss, and then when you don't know where to go, you can always ask Nurse Joy, and Nurse Joy will just tell you the nearest goal.
Right.
And it's like the nearest goal to that place is like supposed to be the last Titan that you fight, and it's like level 60, and you're sitting there at like level 20, and you're like, this is bad.
Time to grind, I guess.
Yeah.
Like Breath of the Wild, I feel like had that problem when it came out that, you know, that very much once you get outside of that opening part, like it's a wide open world. You can go anywhere. But there is a path you're sort of supposed to go down so that you find your horse, so that you find different items and everything. And a lot of people get off that path very early on and they're like, man, this game is really hard. How is everyone else beating it? And you're like, well, you weren't following the like little, you know, breadcrumbs of how you were supposed to get through it. And like, I laugh about it because I think that's like probably super challenging from a design standpoint, right? Like, how do you hold somebody's hand without literally holding their hand?
Right, because then you get people online are like, oh, the yellow paint. Why is this yellow paint?
Yeah.
And that yellow paint is there for a reason because they were testing that game and people were like, I don't know where to go. They're just wandering in circles for like, you know, 40 minutes. And
that's where I think, and this is certainly not easy from a design standpoint. Like it takes a lot more work from a design standpoint, but like that's one of the things where I really value games having different difficulty settings. Like, okay, easy mode, we're going to block it off and you're not going to go there. Or you can play on hard mode where you can just go wherever.
Right. Yeah.
But like that is a lot for developers to put in every single game.
Yeah, I've probably told this story on this podcast before, but it's one of my favorite stories of when they were developing Portal 2. That there's a room you walk into and they need the player to look up. And they said, players are like deer. They never look up. And they said they were testing the game and players would get stuck in that part of the game because they just never bothered to look up. They would just spin around in circles and never look up. And so finally they just had to put a line of dialogue in the game where it says, hey, look up. And I guess, like, you know, potentially some people miss that and like still end up confused. But yeah, that's a hard challenge for designers.
Yeah, and so like I said, I'm like excited to go back to it because I'm like, oh, okay, maybe I'll actually be able to like play and enjoy the game.
Yeah.
Whereas before it was like, okay, I get so far and then I die. And then the next time, like, well, I can kind of learn this segment. So I'm going to just get a little bit further and then just get a little bit further until I can either loop around to another like save point or checkpoint. And like I said, I there are some games I don't have a problem doing that with, but
Sure.
there are others where like, nah, I don't have the time or the patience to deal with this. And so, yeah, like I said, I'm looking forward to going back to it.
And I think that's always a challenge to know, like, how hard is this game supposed to be?
Yeah.
Like, am I making this harder than it's supposed to be?
I think that was literally the message I had typed out in Discord too. A friend was like, is Blasphemous ridiculously hard or am I ridiculously bad? And like I said, I didn't end up sending it. I was like, I thought about hopping into the call, like I said, and then I found this thing. I was like, all right, let me give it another go before I reach out to them before, getting whatever advice they have as well.
I fall into that sometimes when I'm playing a game and I'm battling a boss and I'm like, is this like insanely hard or am I insanely stupid and I'm missing the obvious thing I should be doing?
Me at all times though. I'm like, I'm just a bad gamer. Right. Like I'm just going, you know what? Let me go put it on easy mode. Please. That's all I need.
Well, and I think there are so many instances, especially now, where like there is this aspect of freedom of like,
right.
Right. That was the whole thing about Breath of the Wild. You can solve any of the shrines in any number of ways, right? Like,
right.
Am I making this so much harder than it needs to be?
Yeah.
That was the case for some of the shrines.
That's
sure. Absolutely.
That's one of the things that intimidates me about Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, and is why I've never gotten them and never played them, because I'm like, I know I will make that harder for myself than it needs to be, and I won't have fun.
Yeah. And so, yeah. But like I said, I haven't really played much of anything else. The only other real way I've been spending my free time is watching wrestling, but I won't. Wrestle Talk can be that's a different podcast or a different episode. I've used my allotted time. Next week I won't play anything and I'll just do Wrestle Talk for you.
I do like that we keep talking about doing a wrestling podcast or at least an episode about wrestling. And I feel like it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Eventually we'll get there. Yeah, like I haven't played Blasphemous. I've always wanted to play it because I think it has a cool look to it.
Yeah.
It's really kind of leaning into that very gothic Castlevania kind of style, a little darker than Castlevania, less anime, I guess. And yeah, so I'll be interested if you do continue playing it, you actually make progress, like what your reaction is, because I know lots of people really like that game quite a bit.
Yeah.
All right. Well, the only thing I've played this week is, well, it's not entirely true. I played a little bit of Balatro. We'll talk about that in the news. But I did play more Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, speaking of Metroidvanias. So I talked about this last week, that I was really enjoying this. The more I played this game, the more I like it. It's quickly kind of like moving up that list of favorite games I've played this year.
Nice.
It is a couple of things that, it's a Metroidvania game using the Prince of Persia license. So the thing I'll say about it that I've really enjoyed so far, there's a lot of rooms in the game that are very much sort of skill-based traps and everything. So like you walk into a room and it's like, hey, you have to jump over these spinning grinders and then you have to land on this and throw your disc and it activates this. And then you go through and you have to jump up and jump off of the wall and retrieve your disc and then flip over these other grinders and land and then leap over and drop down. And so it's like, to me, that can get very frustrating if the controls are bad, but the controls on this are very spot on.
That's good.
And the thing that I really like about it is that it never feels unfair. It just feels very challenging as you're doing it. So like what you were talking about with Blasphemous, like, am I dying over and over again because this is too hard and it's unfair to me? Or am I dying over and over again because I'm just not getting the timing right? And it's completely doable if I do it right. And it's the latter, not the former. And the former is incredibly frustrating. And eventually I just give up. But the latter will keep me coming back and, back to a game over and over again, even if I'm dying. So it does that. The other thing that I think it does, I guess two other things that I think it does really well is that one, it very smartly meters out the upgrades and the items that you're collecting so that each time you move into a new area or a different area, you feel like you're making some sort of progress through the game. And I think particularly with these sorts of games, that's really important so that, you're not going hours and hours without a new upgrade. You feel like you're getting something new on a fairly regular basis, or you're getting some item that's going to help you get an upgrade later on. So I think it does that very smartly. The other last thing is, and I don't think all Metroidvanias do this, is that it integrates its story very smartly. So there are like little cutscenes where you talk to characters, and there's characters all throughout this. So, it's not quite Metroid where you're alone in this world. So you're encountering these characters and you'll have little conversations with them, but they keep those conversations both brief and interesting. And I feel like you could really kill a game like this by making all those encounters very long and drawn out, or just making them completely boring. But there's a mystery kind of at the center of this game, and you're figuring that out as you meet these new characters and access the information that they have. And so, I'm just still a few hours into the game, but like every bit of progress I make, I feel like it's leading towards something bigger, which is, the rewarding feeling of this type of game. Why I play these type of games. And so, this is, if you like Metroidvanias, this is one of the best I've played in a long time so far. Like I'll see if it sticks the landing as I get further into it, but so far it's doing all the things that I like about those games and doing it in really kind of fun ways. And it has its share of secrets hidden where like, oh, I can break this wall and look, there's a whole area over here that I can go explore. So if you're big into the Metroidvania games, this is a fantastic one. I would definitely get it. And it's not too crazy. Like you can find it for $20 on sale, which to me feels like completely worth it. Like I've probably already gotten $20 worth of value out of it.
How much time would you say you've put into it thus far?
I am probably about 4 or so hours into it. And then I don't know how long it actually is. I feel like 10 to 12 hours, somewhere in that range. And so I'm maybe a third or so into the game.
Cool.
But I may be wrong on that timing. It may be more like 20, 30 hours. So.
Sure. Well, I'm glad to hear that you're enjoying it so much. I know that when it was first announced, it was like, oh, that's cool that they're doing something. And so to hear that it sounds like they hit the mark is exciting, because that's one that I haven't picked up, but is like kind of I had forgotten about it. And so when you mentioned it last week, I was like, oh yeah, I've been interested in that. So I'm glad to hear you're enjoying it. I mean, we've talked pretty highly about a number of games, so to hear it's climbing that list of potentially favorite games of the year is a big compliment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, like when they first announced this game, like, oh, we're going to do a Prince of Persia Metroidvania, that's one of those things where you're like, yeah, okay, that sort of makes sense if you're trying to do something with this, and this is not going to be your big quadruple A sort of style Prince of Persia game. But also, like, everyone's done this. Like, I feel like there's, 50 Metroidvania games that come out every year.
Yeah.
And, like there's Blasphemous. We got Blasphemous 2 last year, I think it was.
That sounds right.
And so like there are constantly new ones of these games coming out, and lots of them are good, but a lot of them are very forgettable. Right. And this one, like, hey, you told me Ubisoft is making one of these using the Prince of Persia license, I'd be like, like that's probably not going to be much of anything, right? For people who love the genre, they'll probably get something out of it. I feel like this game is of the level where, so far, people who are more casually into the genre or play these games on a casual basis would get a lot out of this game.
Nice.
So, all right, that does it for what we've been playing. Let's move into news. And Nintendo had an Indie World showcase and partner direct this week. They tag teamed them. They put them up together, and gave us both of these at the same time, which was a little surprising. And we'll kind of talk about why that may have happened. But let's talk about what actually got showcased at this first. So I put some of the highlights here, but if there's anything else you want to talk about that I left off, please join in. So they showed off Balatro, the Friends of Jimbo. So we knew that Balatro was adding some sort of like new content. That new content turned out to be from the Witcher, Dave the Diver, Vampire Survivors, and Among Us. And it's basically they replace your face cards. So your queens, your jacks, your kings, and all of that. And then I don't think they do anything. It's just cosmetic, right?
That's what I got. It's just an aesthetic thing.
Yeah. So I did switch it over, but I haven't played a lot with them since I switched it over. You do have to do that yourself. It's not DLC that you download or anything. That was also a little confusing because they were like, this big update's coming, and then you start it up and there's nothing that alerts you to the update. You have to go into a menu and change it yourself. But that has now been added. That's kind of neat to see, to see these indie games sort of supporting one another. Right?
Yeah. I think the one that stood out, a lot of the indies, but like The Witcher, that was the first one announced, I was like, oh, wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
That's less indie.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing that would be very cool, and it might be a bigger ask, but if you get like these easy sort of like very simple like aesthetic cosmetic relationships, maybe those sorts of other games can start to get like jokers devoted to them. Could you find something that like fits into those things as well? And I think that those types of crossovers would be very cool if at some point that can be worked out.
Get an imposter Joker.
Sure.
Yeah, and that's the sort of thing where you could see it like, hey, 1 out of 10 times this Joker is going to like cut your value in half or something, right? But like the other 9 times it's going to double or triple it. And so there's something you could do with that, right? Like to kind of fit that and the way that they currently do their Jokers.
And there's so much. There's already so much that could be added to that in just terms of like creative ideas. That to me is a game that, from like things I've heard from the developer, he'd probably be open to like mods and stuff. But like there's already like forums that are devoted to like custom made Jokers, and so adding in these other sort of worlds, like there's so much rife for potential in terms of like new Joker creation and stuff. So would be very cool if that happens, but if not, I'm just glad that there's more stuff for Balatro.
Yeah, and it gets that game more attention.
Yeah.
It puts it on, the radar for a lot of people. If they're a fan of one of these other games, particularly like, as you noted, like The Witcher, I think, and Among Us, because those are reaching different audiences, I feel like.
Yeah. I'll say Witcher has reached a bunch of non-game fans with the show, and Among Us just with how it blew up.
Yeah.
Well, during COVID, everybody was playing Among Us.
Yeah. It was like Animal Crossing and Among Us was everyone's bread and butter.
So, yeah, that's good. You love to see those little small games like Vampire Survivors and Among Us, like find an audience and then support other small games finding audiences.
Absolutely.
So, cool. They showed off Pizza Tire coming to the Switch. Pizza Tire has already been out on Steam and other platforms. Pizza Tire is basically like a Wario game. It's sort of like the Wario World Game Boy games.
But no Mona Pizza.
Nope, just I forget what the character's name is, but he has his own pizza.
But does he have a catchy song?
The songs in the game are good.
Okay.
So have you played Pizza Tire?
I haven't beaten it, but I've played maybe the first 2 worlds or something. It's one of those games that I was primarily playing it on the Steam Deck, and I would like to go and finish it, but yeah, I have not finished it, but I've played it. It's fun. The Wario Land games are absolutely probably the closest comparison you could make.
Yeah, I played a little bit of it. The Wario Land games, it feels like they are very much making this as like an homage, a tribute, kind of following in that as a genre.
And that was my draw to it. I played so much of Wario Land 4 growing up, and so when I saw this, I was like, yeah, I'll give this a try.
It has a cool art style to it, as well.
Yep.
So, let's see. We finally got another game in the pegging genre, with Peglin. Wait, what are you guys laughing about?
My God.
Like it's his own genre.
Uh-huh.
Like you have Peggle, you have Peglin. Like they're pegging games, right?
Yep, definitely.
I'm so mad neither OJ nor Christina is here.
Look, I am doing this bit for OJ specifically. Make OJ's month. So they show off this game, Peglin. This is apparently also one that's on other platforms, but it's coming to Switch. This is basically Peggle as an RPG. So like you are on an adventure and your encounters and everything, you play a game that looks an awful lot like Peggle.
I've watched a lot of this game. I've got a friend who plays this a lot. It's basically if Peggle was Slay the Spire.
Yeah. Okay.
I've never played it. It's a lot of fun to watch. It's one that every time I watch him play, I was like, I should really get this. And so they just released the 1.0, and that's what this is as well.
So
Okay.
you
Don't, I swear.
what? Hey, you heard it here. Like Mario's really into watching pegging.
But, all right.
I'm just summarizing what.
What I
For the
just
people.
said.
Yeah.
That is,
the
quoted,
audience.
quote.
So yeah, Peglin looks cool. I really like those Peggle games. Those are
You heard it here.
Justin also.
what? Those are specific games. I don't understand. What are you saying?
Well, it sounds like you're interested in the genre of pegging, generally speaking, if you're, intrigued by this one as well.
Look, man, it's fine that you're into watching that sort of thing. It's not my taste. Let's see. We also got DLC announced for Sea of Stars called the Throes of the Watchmaker. This is weird to me that Sea of Stars is getting DLC. I really liked Sea of Stars. That made my top 10 list. Like, it seems weird. Like, why not just make a full sequel to this? Like, why do DLC? Why roll that out? As somebody who played that game, I don't know that I'll go back and play this DLC. But maybe there is an audience for that, right? Like it strikes me as a little weird.
Yeah, I just wonder what it is, because I was thinking the same thing. Like, is this new narrative? Is this just a side story, or is this something different? I know that there's different classes that you can play as.
There's a new character
or jobs or something like that.
So I mean, it feels like it's new narrative content, right? Like, but kind of as a side story is kind of the impression I got. Like
That's what I got as well, which I would agree. If you've already completed the game, is that enough for somebody to go back to? I have still not played it, so it's like, yeah, that sounds great. But yeah, if somebody's completed it, it would be interesting to hear what their reason for going back and doing it more of it. Just
let's see. Power Wash Simulator is unsurprisingly getting more DLC, but the DLC that they are getting was a little surprising. It is Shrek. And I think the thing that was like neatest about this was you are cleaning up Shrek's swamp. So it's all colored with like rainbows and everything. And you are actually like washing the rainbows off and returning it to its, Shrek swampiness and everything.
I am unreasonably excited for this. This is just like bringing back my childhood right there. Like, I watched that trailer, and the fact that they had the music, I just like, oh my gosh. Like, I'm finally going to play Power Wash Simulator with the volume turned up.
Is it just playing the song All Star on a loop?
No, sadly. No, but it's the score.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the word I was looking for.
I do feel like it's a little like conflicting in terms of like what Shrek would want in his swamp. I feel like you should be spraying the like mud. You should be dirtying up
Oh no, I
Well,
think
You're
I think
cleaning
it,
the rainbows off. So
I think it absolutely needs to end with Shrek appearing and going, "What are you doing in my swamp?
That would also be very good.
Like, why are you cleaning it?
I don't think they can get Mike Myers to do that.
Just pay him enough. If it's just use the line recorded from the first movie. I don't care. I don't need a re-recording of the line."
I imagine they have to pay him since that's like a new use, but I actually don't know how that works. But yeah, I mean, I do think that's kind of weird. Like, I actually did think that, like, are you going to include a character like, is the gingerbread man going to be standing there like making commentary?
Yeah.
Like, that would be a whole lot of fun to add to the environment. I
I
understand.
know, like, who's going to be texting us the whole time?
Like,
It can't be Donkey. He doesn't have fingers.
Well, I understand you can't get Mike Myers or Eddie Murphy to come in, but like, it seems like, I don't know who the voice actor for the gingerbread man is, but it seems like you could get somebody of that level to come in and record some lines.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, they did just release, was it the new Puss in Boots was last year, 2 years ago?
Yeah.
Antonio
Yeah.
Banderas is still living the Puss in Boots life. So,
That's true.
you know, you might be able to.
They are making a new Shrek movie.
I'll
Are
say.
they? Okay.
They
Always is also not surprising.
yeah.
I think they're going to make a new Puss in Boots movie too, because that movie was surprisingly a hit. Like,
Yeah. Especially after how bad the first one was.
yeah. Let's see. They showed off Metal Slug Tactics, which is only surprising in that game still exists. Because that was a game that it felt like was supposed to come out 2 years ago, and they kind of announced it, and then you never heard another word about that game. So them actually showcasing it and saying, "Hey, this is coming out like this year," is cool. Like, I really like the art from that game. They're really capturing the art of the Metal Slug games. We'll see how it actually plays. Let's see. They announced Tetris Forever. So this is the Digital Eclipse people who do the Goldmaster series, who did Atari 50 and all that. They're making a game about Tetris, which is going to have like 14 different Tetris games, including Tetris Battle Gaiden, which has never gotten a U.S. release before. So it's also going to include the NES version of Tetris. So all of that in a big package. Plus, the thing that looked pretty neat is in a lot of these packages, they sort of make like an enhanced version or a new version of these classic games. So they're going to have a 4-player competitive Tetris game that you can play. But as you're playing, it is rotating through different styles of different Tetris games. So like, it shows you in a very modern one, and then it switches over to like the Game Boy version of Tetris while you're in the middle of playing it. And so it's going to like kind of rotate through those. In addition, this is like the other Goldmaster series games. This is going to have documentary footage where they're going and interviewing people about the history of Tetris. Of course, there's that Apple film that came out a year or two ago about Tetris, a dramatization. This is going to be, more documentary focused and everything.
Did anybody watch that Tetris movie?
I did.
I feel like you had mentioned it.
Yeah, it's okay. It's not as good as you want it to be.
I'll say that's a bummer that it's just okay.
Yeah.
I thought you liked that movie.
Well, I like it, but like, it's not great.
Okay. That's
like
fair.
It's interesting, right? Like, if you're interested in sort of video game history, it's kind of an interesting film, but it's not as amazing as the trailer made it out to be.
Gotcha.
So anyways, yes, that's coming out, and it's going to have all those different versions. Also, NES Tetris is coming to Nintendo Online. So if you subscribe to Nintendo Online, the NES version of Tetris is coming to that, which is just kind of cool because like, a lot of people don't understand that Tetris is a license. Like, you have to license Tetris. And so to put out something like that, Nintendo can't just put that game out. They have to get the license back. And as part of this whole deal, they're allowed to put that back out and everything. And for a lot of people, that's the first version of Tetris they ever played. So there's a lot of fond memories attached to it. They show off a game called Star Overdrive, which had you like surfing on a hoverboard, which looked cool. Like, I I don't know anything else about that game other than it had a cool look and style to it.
Yeah.
It looked like a sort of anime game, but like one where the gameplay actually looked cool, and I might want to check it out.
As opposed to, what was it, Gal Guardians that you played?
Yeah, well, Gal Guardians has other issues with it. No, but I mean, like a lot of those anime games don't appeal to me personally, right? Like I have no attachment to the anime. I have no attachment to that particular style other than it's sort of that classic Japanese art style for games. This one like had a hook to it, right? So as soon as I saw that, I was like, okay, that looks fun. That looks cool. To me personally.
You got to hear anime game, but it's actually good.
Are you going to argue that most anime games are good?
It was just funny.
No, I poke fun, but I really am like, yeah, how many anime games are just fighting games? Like,
and bad fighting games.
fighting games.
Like Dragon Ball FighterZ is a good fighting game, right? Like that's actually a cool game, but like so many of those are
yeah, I think the
they're
only
just
one,
forgettable.
the only one that's really coming to mind that has a plot is the Inuyasha Game Boy Advance game, and that sure was a game. So like I poke fun, but you're not wrong.
Yeah. Let's see. We have the SpongeBob SquarePants Patrick Star game.
I'm sorry, you mean the
would you like to read that how it's actually typed out?
The SpongeBob SquarePants?
Look, I think the E key is broken on my computer.
No, it's there on game.
It is there on
I think
game.
I copy and pasted that part.
Sure.
So this is an open world physics based game.
What?
Yeah, it was weird. I'm not going to lie. I was like, I'm not surprised you'd make a Patrick Star game because I feel like people would probably like that, but the physics aspect of it seemed odd. That is not what I would have expected, but all right.
How is it? What?
You like roll around as Patrick. Have you ever played a Katamari game?
No, but I've seen them.
It felt like the movement was like Katamari-esque.
Yeah, so
You're not like collecting and rolling things, but like that's how Patrick moved.
What?
yeah, so it's not a character platformer like most of the SpongeBob games are, right? Like
Yeah.
like Battle for Bikini Bottom, right? Like that's I feel like the most beloved of those games, and it is not that. Which is actually cool because like this game actually kind of interests me now, right?
Yeah.
Like
Because it's doing something different.
yeah, and
Yeah.
like I mean I'm not a SpongeBob fan really, right? Like I didn't grow up with SpongeBob, so I have no like emotional attachment other than like it's kind of like I get it, it's kind of cute and like you know like I know that Bikini Bottom game people say is a pretty good game. But like this doing something different, it's like, oh, well, this is maybe something different than your average licensed game.
Yeah.
And this might actually be interesting to me as a video game where, you know, often these games kind of fall into that anime category of like, well, that's a game, like, but it's not a game that's going to interest me personally. Right. Like, and I have nothing against the people who are like, people love SpongeBob or SpongeBob.
Squarepont.
Squarepont. They showed off a Fitness Boxing 3, which is insane that we've got a third fitness boxing game. These are made by Nintendo.
I was going to say, we had Fitness Boxing 1 and 2?
Yeah, like these are, well, published by Nintendo, at least, I guess I should say.
Exercise science develops over time, and you got to get a new game to keep up with the science.
I mean, this has like a whole new soundtrack and everything. Like, apparently these games...
I think they are sort of not Wii Fit, Just Dance-esque.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like these games apparently sell pretty well for Nintendo.
They must if they're making a third one.
Right, yeah. And they did that. I thought the coolest one, they did that Fist of the North Star one.
Yeah.
Like, I thought that was actually like really clever when they did that.
An anime game, but
I
it's
sort of remember that one.
Well, again, an anime game that was actually interesting.
I didn't say it was good. I said it was interesting.
I didn't play the game. I don't know if it was good. I think you can punch people and blow their heads up. So
I think the one
I think
thing
it
that
probably looks better than Mortal Kombat 1 on Switch.
look, we are just like
you just have to let that one lie.
going after OJ left and right here.
I think the thing that made me chuckle from this particular section of the trailer was that you could customize the trainer's hair.
Yes.
I think that was the only thing that was customizable, but I was just like, all right, sure.
Why?
I don't know. That's what it's like. If I like my personal gameplay experience, I don't know. I'm
wanna
flirting with
customize
my
my trainer.
boxing trainer, and I like your hair like this.
I can't get a workout unless my trainer has bangs.
I think, like I said, I think that's totally fine. I really have no problem. It made me chuckle that was one of the things that they highlighted was that you could customize the trainer's hair.
Yeah, like I could get highlighting, customize your character's
Sure.
look, but like customize the that's just goofy. I'm here for it.
What I like about that is I can create an entire narrative now. So I can have my trainer with bangs, and then like between our workouts, she's gone through a bad breakup. Her bangs are gone now. And so like now all of a sudden I'm role playing in.
Well, that's what I was
fitness
saying. Is like
boxing.
on Mondays he wears his hair like this. On Tuesdays,
Oh my gosh.
Let's see. We got an announcement for Capcom Fighting Collection 2, which is a huge assortment of different fighting games. But the big ones were the Capcom versus SNK games, Part 1 and 2, and Power Stone 1 and 2. So there are other games in this collection, but those tended to be the ones that people were losing their minds over. I'm not the biggest fan of the Capcom versus SNK games. I hear they're very, very good if you're into those fighting games. But Power Stone, man, I am excited to see them bringing Power Stone back and making it playable online. That's fantastic news. Those are amazing multiplayer games, kind of pick up and play melee fighting games. So that's really cool to see them bringing that back.
yeah, I think the one from this that stood out was Project Justice, which is the sequel to Rival Schools on the PlayStation. So I've never played Project Justice. Rival Schools is a lot of fun. It's clunky nowadays, but I'm excited that they're doing that one.
So you said Project Justice and the fact that it's Capcom. I'm like, is Apollo Justice in these? Like we got,
And I think these are before Apollo Justice
Yeah.
ever existed.
I'm like, we got Phoenix Wright and Maya Fey in one of the Capcom versus games. So I'm like,
I imagine most of these were probably Dreamcast games originally. No, both the Power Stones were. Project Justice was.
Well, I mean, I think Power Stone was in the arcade.
Oh, okay. I guess that also makes sense.
Yeah, so my understanding is when there is an arcade version, that is the version that's included in the collection.
Okay.
But I think at least one of the games was a Dreamcast exclusive.
I think I have Power Stone on the Dreamcast, and so that's where I think of it. But
Well, that's where those games came from. That's where I played them originally. And of course the Dreamcast was a 4-player console, so like you have a 4-player fighting game designed around that.
Yeah.
So that was just fantastic party games. That's not coming until 2025 because in September we do have the Fighting Collection 1, the Marvel collection that's coming out. So that is coming out in like just over 2 weeks or something. But this is really cool. It's cool to see them putting out more of these old games. And I feel like if you're a fighting game fan, this is a fantastic collection.
yeah.
Just the sheer number of games and everything.
Well, and hopefully they get good online support as well, because I think being able to go and play these online, and if it's just like a relatively decent sized community for each of the different games, you could try them out. And I think that's really cool.
Let's see. They showed off the Suikoden 1 and 2 remaster collection. So these are complete remakes of Suikoden 1 and 2, or Suikoden, as it's sometimes pronounced. I don't know the actual correct way. I always called it Suikoden. That's how I always heard it pronounced, and then now I hear people call it Suikoden.
I'll say, looking at it, I think Suikoden, but I also don't really know.
Yeah, I've only ever heard it pronounced Suikoden, but cool.
But these had been shown off before, and then they were sort of, again, I think showed off last fall,
Yeah.
and then nothing was ever said about them. And then now they actually showed these and announced a date attached to it. So those are coming out in March of next year. And like, those are fantastic games. If you like Japanese role-playing games, those are two fantastic Japanese role-playing games. So like, kind of, big thumbs up on those. They also showed off Dragon Quest III, the HD 2D remake. They announced a date for that for November 14th. Remember, we are also getting a Dragon Quest 1 and 2 HD 2D remake, but obviously that's coming later. So that will not be this year sometime. One of the biggest surprises, was the Castlevania Dominus collection. And this is the DS games.
Yeah.
So we talked about this when they released the Advanced collection, and would they ever put out a collection? And we talked about how like that's challenging because obviously on the DS there's two screens, so they have to either completely remake the games or they have to figure out a way to display that. Well, they did the latter. They figured out how to display all that on one screen. They actually give you several options, several different layouts that you can choose from. And that was a surprise launch. That's out right now. So
Yeah, that looks so. I mean, I'm just like, when I have money, I want to get this and finally play Dawn of Sorrow.
Yeah, this was probably the same for me as well. The most exciting announcement. Trying to emulate those DS games are really clunky. It doesn't matter what DS game. So yeah, this is probably the most exciting to get to play those three.
And for me personally, like I played some of the advanced Castlevania games when they were being released, but by the time they got to these, they were releasing one of those games like every year. And I just kind of fell off, even though I never thought they got bad. I never disliked any of them. It was just one of those things of like, oh no, there's like 6 of these games.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to play through all 6 of these, in a 6-year period. And so I just never played them. And so like, I'm excited to go back and play these. It also includes Haunted Castle, which is the Castlevania arcade game, and a remake of that with like modern graphics. So, that's a fun little bonus included in there as well. But like that was a good, those are good collections that they're putting out. So good on them. They also announced that Yakuza Kiwami is coming out, which I would have, if you had told me, I would have thought this game was already out on Switch, but apparently this has never come out. This is the remake of the original Yakuza game. So it's finally coming out on Switch.
Yeah, I was talking to a friend. He speedruns most of the Yakuza games. I think I was surprised that they wouldn't do Kiwami and Kiwami 2 together. And then he was surprised. I think he said, I would have bet that they would have put 0 on the Switch before Kiwami. But the thing that he said that I didn't realize, I guess Amazon has a Yakuza show coming out in like October or something like that. That's like
Really?
gonna line up almost exactly when this comes out. And I believe the show is based off of the first game, which is Kiwami.
That makes sense.
And so once he said that, I was like, well, it makes sense that they would try and line those two things up.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess the Kiwami show the Yakuza show was announced in like June or July, or at least that's when the date got announced. I completely missed that. So, that's like in, I want to say October or November sometime. Whenever this game is coming out, it was like very close to that.
Is there going to be a scene in that show of you fighting in a diaper?
I think that's in 0. So I don't, maybe if they ever go back and do a prequel.
Yeah. Flashbacks.
Yeah.
Let's see. The one thing left off this list that I forgot was they announced a Worms Armageddon anniversary edition. And this is also coming from Digital Eclipse, who is apparently extremely busy. So not only is it they're doing a 16:9 presentation of the game and HD graphics for it, is going to have online play, and they're also including documentary footage with this, like talking to people about the making of the game and everything. And I will say, much like Power Stone, this is a Dreamcast game that I played a ton of with friends back when I was in college, which, you know, when you start looking at the date, it kind of makes me sad.
It's just a couple years ago.
Yeah, that's how it feels. But anyways, you know, them showcasing this and everything, this is a fantastic game. Like, this is a game people should pick up and play. Yeah, it's been available before different ways, but to have this sort of presentation, have online play in it, and you know, this is making this the de facto package to get for this game. So I'm really excited about that. Worms is a fantastic series. So, and for me personally, Armageddon is the peak of that franchise.
I feel like most people would probably agree with that. Armageddon seems to be the one I feel like I always hear most people talk about.
Yeah. I think some of the ones that came immediately after that were, you know, well liked enough and everything, but yeah, it's still simple enough that people can kind of pick up and play it and learn it pretty quickly. So that does it for the Nintendo Direct. So the thing that was kind of interesting about this is, so like last week we talked about they did the Museum Direct, and then they announced this where they were combining an indie showcase and this partner direct. Lots of people, this isn't their normal schedule. Normally they do a show like this, a direct in September. Coming up in September is Tokyo Game Show, which is the big, you know, the E3 equivalent in Japan, let's say. And so a lot of people are looking at this saying, well, why would they move this up? Why not do this around Tokyo Game Show? Like, does this mean that they're planning something for Tokyo Game Show? And that's got a lot of people talking about, might we get our first news about the Switch 2 in September sometime? So this was them sort of clearing the road for that. You know, they've announced their first party games through the beginning of next year. Now they've announced the third party games through the beginning of next year. If Nintendo's going to talk about anything for the rest of the year, it seems like it almost has to be Switch 2.
I mean, it's got to be sooner rather than later, I would think.
Yeah.
But
I mean, it depends when they're planning to release that Switch 2, right? If they're releasing it next fall, then
maybe not.
Yeah, you probably don't talk about it now. But if you're releasing it in the spring, in April, you kind of would want to start talking about it sometime this fall, right?
You would think you'd start to build some amount of hype for it a little bit, or at least let people know what it is.
Yeah, let people know what it is. Let people start saving for it.
Save and all that sort of stuff.
The other thought is that at Tokyo Game Show, Nintendo will almost certainly be there. They'll be probably meeting with people, talking about developing games. And while they almost, you know, they already obviously have people working on games for the Switch 2, third parties, that Tokyo Game Show may be where that all starts to leak out. Right. And so they might want to try to get ahead of all that and get the message out about the Switch before it all leaks out after Tokyo Game Show.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so that might be part of the logic behind all of this. But, you know, I still think that was a pretty good direct and everything. Like, there are things that came out that I'm excited about.
Yeah. I mean, even though I think a lot of the things, if I were to buy them, I don't know if I'd get them on the Switch. It's exciting that a lot of them got announced for sure.
Yeah. Let's see. So direct news, we have Capcom is removing gendered armor in the upcoming Monsters Hunter Wild. So this will be the first Monster Hunter game that does not have gendered armor, meaning that any armor can be worn by any sex. So you won't have the like necessarily bikini armor like for the female characters where they can't wear normal armor. But I suppose also that means the male characters can wear the bikini armor. So that's kind of neat to see them doing and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
PlayStation 5 Pro details have leaked, so including a mock-up. Somebody says they have an image of the box and what it looks like, but they can't release that image because that would be violating Sony's copyright. So instead, they drew what the PlayStation 5 looked like from the box image.
Were they at least a good artist?
It's a decent drawing. It looks a lot like the PlayStation 5 Slim that they released. And the biggest news, I think, coming out of it was that the image, the version that they show, and they have corroborated this, that there is no disk drive on it. So the question is, the PlayStation 5 Slim you can buy without a disk drive. And the disk drive you can buy separately, and then it connects to it.
Oh, that's right.
So the question is, are they going to just not release one with the disk drive built in, and going forward, all PlayStation 5 models will be this, where you buy the disk drive separately and connect it?
I mean, it gets them more money if you have to buy it separately.
Yeah, I mean...
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I hope not, but I'm not surprised if that is what it ultimately becomes.
Yeah, I'm very grumpy if that becomes the case, but I could see it becoming the case.
I mean, yeah, I think the expectation moving forward, I think as we've talked about, basically every time something like this comes up, is that eventually none of them will have that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, that's probably trying to get people used to that, right? Because you'll be buying a system without a disk drive. I mean, the flip side is to think that maybe this is all about making it an option, making it optional, right? Like when you buy a new game console, it's not going to have a disk drive by default, but it'll always be an option. That would be the hope, right? For people who want that as a choice. But,
well, I think the other thing, the thing that makes me feel like eventually none of them will, and I don't even know if it'll be an option, is just as we see more and more games not even have a physical release.
Sure.
I know we'll talk about it later, but maybe if it's okay, we can jump forward. I know Black Myth Wukong, I still don't think has a physical release for PlayStation 5. I don't know if there is a planned physical release, but there have been a number of games now that we've talked about that.
Control 2.
If they do
Control 2,
Alan Wake 2. If they do have a physical release, it either comes late because it's part of some like super special awesome edition,
like limited run games.
Yeah.
Sort of. Yeah. So we'll see what that comes of that. Along with that leak, the people who provided that leak say they also expect an announcement in the first half of September of this PlayStation 5 Pro. Again, sort of lining up with Tokyo Game Show. That would make a whole lot of sense. If they're going to have this thing into retailers this fall sometime, they've got to announce it sooner than later. And I kind of wonder, like, so Alicia, I know you don't have a PlayStation 5 yet. Mario, you do. Like, what would a PlayStation 5 Pro need to entice you to either upgrade or to buy it at a heightened cost over the regular PlayStation 5?
A disk drive. Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, the reason I asked this question, right, is I have a PlayStation 5. It plays games in 4K. Like there aren't a whole lot of exclusive games that are developed just for the PlayStation 5 where I feel like they're really like pushing it to its edge of power. Mm-hmm. And so, like I don't know what the marketing promise of this is. Is the marketing promise that games will play in 60 frames a second? So you won't have any more games playing at 30 frames a second? Like, what is the promise of this hardware that gets people to upgrade?
It would be that. Like, I know with the difference between the 4 and the 4 Pro, there were certain games that, from everything that I saw, like really chugged on the regular 4. And so if there were like and maybe it's not any of the games now, but if like games started to come out where it was, playing this on the regular 5 is just like, not just like a slightly worse experience, but like you save your money. Like that's where, like, that would be
frame rates in the teens.
Yeah.
I could see whenever part 3 of Final Fantasy VII Remake comes out, if that is one of those games that is significantly different on Pro versus normal,
Yeah, you get bad frame rates or just really bad lag in certain areas. I'd like to think that will not be the case, but if that gets to what it would be, that I would have to consider it, but I wouldn't want to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just, like, I'm very interested to see how they're going to market this. Like, just a more powerful PlayStation 5 does not get me excited at this moment.
Well, and like, as someone who hasn't had her own PlayStation since the 2, you know, there's not a whole lot of PlayStation games that I'm like you said, are there games that are not gonna play on how I want them to on the 5? Well, maybe in the future there will be, but right now there's nothing to entice me to buy a more expensive version.
Yeah, I guess I'd put it this way. As of now, there's nothing that I would be like day one, oh, I'm getting in this thing for sure.
Yeah.
It would, but yeah, down the line, maybe, but that's a who knows.
Yeah.
Sure.
And the other thing is, how far down the line at that point would it be worth getting it, or would it just be wait for the 6?
Yeah, I mean, it would depend on what the life cycle looks like, and as those continue to get longer and longer, maybe. But yeah, I would fall into that same mentality.
But we're like, when did these consoles come out? 2019?
That sounds right.
PS5 was.
I want to say it was Thanksgiving 2019, because they were. I feel like it was right before COVID. I feel like.
Yeah, I feel like they came out before COVID.
And then COVID really messed up like the distribution of them all.
Yeah.
If it wasn't, then it would, because I don't feel like they would release them during the fall of COVID.
No, I think you're right. I think it was like fall of 19.
Yeah. So like, anyways, point being, like, these consoles are like 5 years old at this point. The Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5, right?
Which is wild to think about. Like, they still feel new, but
Yeah.
Which is how long console generations used to last. Like, in the 8-bit and 16-bit days, the console cycle was every 5 years. We got a new system. We're 5 years in, and they're just releasing a Pro console. So, like, Alicia,
I think that's why I'm like, because my brain still goes to like, okay, like, we're probably looking at the end of this lifespan pretty soon here.
Well, I mean, we have to be to some degree, right? Like, how much longer is this going to go? Like 2 or 3 more years? Like,
it's sort of like a 0.5 of a generation.
Yeah.
I feel like that kind of started with like, I guess.
It did come out November 2020.
Really?
Yep.
Oh, okay. So
right.
we're 4 years in. But even still, right? 4 years in, and you're starting to look at it and go, okay, well, how much longer does this last? 7 years? So we're already over halfway through that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I just, for me, like, I very much had the issue that you were talking about, Alicia. Like, why would I upgrade? I'd rather just wait for the PlayStation 6. If I'm going to buy another PlayStation, it's going to be really hard to entice me without, it just being a whole new console generation. But like, these mid steps don't entice me in the way that a whole new piece of hardware does.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I mentioned I got a PS4 Pro, but that was the first one that I got.
Right.
I didn't
Yeah.
have a regular. And so like, I could understand absolutely getting one if this is the first one you're getting. At that point,
Yeah.
so like, if you end up getting one, you might as well just save up. Unless having a disc drive on the thing is that important to you.
Yeah. But no, absolutely. It's like, it makes sense if that's what's out when you get it.
I guess
Get
also
the Pro,
depending on price
but-
differences, but yeah.
But like, even the Slim now, right? Like, that doesn't come with a disk drive by default. Or I think there is a package where it's packed in, but it's not built in to the original models. So yeah, no, I mean, it's kind of a weird proposition. So it'll be interesting to see what their sales point for this is. How do they pitch this to players? Because some people will buy it no matter what. Some people always want the newest and the greatest. But like, I feel like that's a small audience when you're talking about a $500 console.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, right after it comes out might be the time to go to a GameStop or a pawn shop and be like, hey, you got any PS5s in? Because you might be able to get one for a semi-decent price used.
Well, I think that's part of the argument, right? Like, if you can get that 20% of the market to upgrade to this, who just want the latest and greatest, they then do something with their old PlayStation 5s, old in quotation marks here.
Yeah.
They do something with it. They either give it to somebody like a friend or a family member, or they sell it, right? They trade it in the pawn shop or GameStop or somewhere. And then now all of a sudden there are cheaper PlayStation 5s in the market, these used ones or these ones that are gifted. And then that gets a new audience into the PlayStation 5. So from Sony's perspective, there's a logic to that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just not sure that's a big enough group that's going to make that upgrade for that to have an impact, right?
Well, and that's what it's like. If I were to upgrade, that's what I would try and do. I'd either, ask if somebody and say, hey, would you want to buy this? Or, trade it in somewhere and then try and get the upgraded one. But again, that feels unlikely.
Well, and even within that population, you also have a good number of people who just keep it.
Yeah.
Oh,
they'll
absolutely.
They'll have a second one.
Yeah.
Right? This one is I'm going to move this one into my bedroom, and
Yeah.
this will be on the main TV, whatever.
Yeah. So it's like you've already got that small population of people who will upgrade automatically, and then, I don't know, maybe have it for the people who keep it.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people I know have kids. That's their thing,
Sure.
right? Like this one will be out on the TV. This one is in my room for me to play, and the kids don't touch it, or something like that. Let's see. Remedy Entertainment is partnering with Annapurna, and Annapurna will fund 50% of the development of Control 2. And in exchange, Annapurna is going to get the rights to bring Control and Alan Wake to TV, movies, and more. Remedy will retain the IP rights to the series, so they are not selling the rights of the IP. I feel like that's an important point because Remedy has sort of clawed back a lot of their IP so that they have control over it now again. But in exchange, basically they're selling off the film rights for these two series, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, both of these seem like they would make sense as TV shows or movies, and Annapurna generally does pretty good stuff, so I'm willing to trust what they would do with it.
We should note that Annapurna was founded by one of the Ellisons, the daughter of the family, Larry Ellison of Oracle. His son is the one who's been trying to purchase Paramount. So you do kind of wonder, might this link up, with that in some form or fashion? Though that deal is now questionable, and there's lawsuits, and it's anarchy. So that deal may never come to happen. But this deal seems to be happening. So we will get a Control 2, and Annapurna will have the chance to develop those into movies or television series. Speaking of movies, we got a trailer for Sonic the Hedgehog 3. As soon as I saw this, I thought Alicia is going to flip out. So, Alicia, what did you think of the trailer for Sonic the Hedgehog 3? Mario and I will give our reactions, but we should let you talk first.
I'm just so excited that this is continuing. We say it all the time. These movies are better than they have any right to be. They're just fun. And I'm like, this is continuing the trend of fun, while also we've been talking about it from the minute that they said that they showed Shadow in the second movie. It's like, cool, we're gonna watch a 12-year-old die on screen.
Because they show in the trailer, they show the little girl, right?
Yeah, they show Maria, and they show they're clearly kneeling over her body. We're gonna see a 12-year-old die on screen. Let's go. But the thing that's...
But is Sonic going to kiss her first?
No, that's Elise.
Yeah. Maria dies 50 years before Sonic is born.
Yeah, Justin.
Duh. Speaking of anime.
But I think what's really delightful about this is...
I thought Sonic Mage just went around kissing young women.
No. No.
That's only Sonic fans' dreams.
Only in Amy Rose's dreams. No,
You
but...
gotta go to fanfiction.net in order to read the Sonic kissing all of
Oh, man. But No, so what was really delightful watching the trailer was seeing these moments recreated from like Sonic Heroes and from the opening VFX for the Shadow the Hedgehog game. And so when I was talking with my sister about this, she brought up, because she was watching reactions to the trailer and somebody brought this up, and then I looked it up too. And Jeff Fowler, the movie director, who's directing this movie, one of his first jobs in the VFX industry was animating the intro cutscene for Shadow the Hedgehog.
That's cool.
So like getting to have that full circle moment and bring back those exact shots was just so cool.
That probably explains the the fidelity to the source material right there. Like, this is somebody who has a real love for it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, my reaction, this one looks the most video gamey of these films they've made so far.
Yeah.
Like, it's the one that looks like this could be the intro video. Like, the trailer looks like it could be the intro video to a Sonic game.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, Keanu Reeves as the voice of Shadow is like, again, this series continues to have inspired casting with the voice actors. Like, Tails is the only one who's not like a big star.
And it's the person who voices Tails in the games.
Yeah.
So like it makes sense that she's there.
But it's been very smart casting for Sonic with Ben
Schwartz.
Ben Schwartz, and then
Idris Elba.
Idris Elba was like very inspired casting for Knuckles.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, if you told me Idris Elba is going to be in a Sonic game movie, I would have been like, what? No, like, Idris Elba does serious work.
Well, you can tell
Serious work, but also makes questionable decisions with the work.
Yeah.
I mean, he's in that Fast and Furious movie, right?
He's also in Cats.
Well, a lot of people make questionable choices with Cats.
He's also Stringer Bell, and we forgive everything else he's ever done because he's that.
Yeah. He's done some fantastic work in addition to his more questionable choices.
Yeah.
Maybe not the best agent.
But yeah, it's just, I love that these movies capture how fun Sonic can be,
Right.
and should be, and it really feels like they're continuing that.
One of the social media posts I saw that I thought was very fun is that they actually put an image of Jim Carrey from Sonic 1 and 2 and 3 side by side, and they said they have slowly been evolving Jim Carrey into the game accurate look over the course of these three films. And when you see it side by side, it's like very clever how they've done it, right?
Yeah.
So that by this one, outside of like having the Eggman shape, right? Like, they didn't put him in a big fat suit or anything. Not from what we've seen so far. He may end up in that.
Well, but they do make a point that he's pudgier.
Yeah. They have really evolved his look to fit the games, and
The mustache.
yeah, and they've done it in a fun way,
Yeah.
right? Which is like good for them. So, yeah, I mean, look, I thought that first film was not the train wreck that everything pointed to it being. Remember that first trailer and how Sonic looked? And, like, that just looked like a train wreck of a movie. And then it came out and it was like, oh, this is inoffensive, right? And then that second film came out and it was better than the first film.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, like, they're actually getting something right here. And then this one, again, the trailer and the casting, everything seems to point to at least the quality of that second film. And that very much impresses me. Like, I mean, I love to like poke at Sonic.
I say, mark the calendar. Justin just complimented Sonic the Hedgehog.
Hey, like, I mean, I said Frontiers, like everything I saw about that, I was wrong. Like, that game looked horrible, and then it came out, and people were like, "No,
around.
This is actually pretty decent." And the other thing is, this makes a whole lot of sense. You were talking, Mario, about lining up with the release of a game and a TV series. So we're getting that remake of Sonic Generations with Shadow added in just this fall, right before this film comes out.
I didn't watch the trailer for this. Did they give a date for when it's?
December 20th,
okay.
which is also really great because that's over winter break, so I'll be able to see it with my sister.
Yeah.
Not 17 times.
Yeah.
But getting to go see it with my sister will be really special.
Oh, that'll be absolutely.
I feel like our crew's not going to get to go see it. Like we only go see the really bad ones, like Borderlands
And Garfield.
yes, and Garfield.
I wasn't invited to Garfield.
Well, we were doing you a favor.
Yeah.
I think you're welcome. And there should be a thank you.
That was a
attached to
mercy. Yeah, so that then we'll see how that turns out and everything. But
I think it's going to be a good movie. You know, it's like I said, these are just fun movies, and I am very excited for this one.
cool. And if the Sonic fans are pleased, then at least they'll be showing up. So the film should do well. Because man, those games continue to sell beyond all reason. So the Sonic fans show up with their pocketbooks. Let's see. Star Wars Outlaws. PlayStation 5 players of this game were asked to start a new save, so they put out a patch for the game. Because people were getting to a point where they could no longer progress in the game, post-patch, they were asked to start a new game or the patch wouldn't be effective. The issue being that the people who were playing the game at the point that it got patched were only the people who had paid $110 to play the early, the early launch version of the game. So people paid $100 to play this game early, and now all their progress is being wiped out of the game.
Have to start over.
I feel like it's it blows my mind that they were like, hey, yeah, please restart your save. It's going to be buggy if you don't restart your save. I'm like, you should be crawling back to these players going, here's your $110 and here's extra content, and we're so sorry.
They are apparently giving those players some extra items in the game. That was
woohoo, extra items. That's not $110.
Yeah, that was not announced up front. And I feel like there was some blowback in response to this. And they were like, hey, we'll include some extra items in here.
No, they should be crawling on their hands and knees back to these players.
Yeah, so when I posted this story to the group chat, I just posted the comment, stop prepaying for games, right? Stop paying to play games early. Stop pre-ordering games. Just stop giving companies your money until you know that the game is good and that it works. This is yet another example. Stop it.
Yeah. Because they're not going to come crawling back to give you your $110 back. They're just going to throw you some extra items in game.
No, I mean they don't. There's nothing holding them to it. Let's see. Concord. Remember Concord?
Vaguely.
Concord launched and it had 700 players on Steam on launch day.
Wahoo.
Which is pretty atrocious. Now that is on Steam. Those numbers aren't official. Those are people pulling data to try to calculate those numbers. Of course, that game was also on PlayStation 5, so the player base may have been there. But it doesn't seem like people are playing Concord. It seems like Concord is a disaster. It seems like Sony is going to lose a lot of money off of this game. And, of course, this is one of those games that was supposed to be their big venture into live service games. And, of course, now here we have it as bombing. So that is not good news, right, if you're wanting to make a live service game. This is just the least surprising news because I feel like we've been talking about this for months since this game was announced.
Yeah, unfortunately.
So I feel bad for the developers.
Maybe that they're gonna get that episode of what is it, Secret Level or something like that.
Yeah, the animated anthology.
Maybe that'll bring some more people in, but it is hard to imagine, especially when it costs $40. Right. And you've got so many other games that are similar that are just free, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. Like Marvel Rivals is launching in December. Yeah. That's free. Overwatch is free.
Deadlock, I know, is the new one. It hasn't fully released yet. I know that's only invite only. But that's also free.
Right.
So
that's the new Valve game.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how Sony pivots on this. It feels like the sort of game that next month will get free on PlayStation Plus.
Yep.
Yep.
Because, like, do you just give up, or do you try to salvage this in some form or fashion?
Right. Well, and the other one that we talked about that kind of had the same fate was Foam Stars, which I know
Right.
they're now giving away for free as well. Not
Yeah.
on PlayStation Plus, but I think it's just free to play that game.
And that's a pretty neat game, but it just didn't connect at launch.
Yeah.
It didn't find an audience, and that's true of so many of these live service games. Like, they don't find an audience, and it's kind of over at that point. I mean, there are always those weird success stories. I mean, Among Us, that was a game that it launched and it kind of bombed. Like, nobody was playing that game, and then COVID made that game a hit.
Yeah.
So there's always weird stories like that. I don't know how much this is worth talking about, except the next few stories we're going to talk about also kind of tie into this. There has also been controversy surrounding Concord because of sort of backlash against one of their lead developers. One of the lead developers of the game is apparently non-binary, uses they, them pronouns. And there was, this is apparently fairly public, to people following the development of this game. That person posts on social media and everything about the game. And when this game kind of fell, they had went on social media and posted some comments, like very frustrated with people not playing the game or judging it without playing it. I think eventually they left social media. They, or took their account private and everything. But there was a huge amount of backlash against that person and attacking them for their identity, blaming their identity for the failure of this game, that they had tried to push identity politics into the studio and the development of the game.
Oy.
I saw people talking about that generally on Twitter. I didn't realize it was probably connected to this. I hate that I'm not surprised that happened. But yeah.
Yeah. And look, I think it's important to shine a light on that stuff sometimes when it happens.
Yeah.
I also think sometimes that sort of stuff deserves to be kind of ignored because it loses some of its power in the process. The reason I bring it up is because it does tie into a couple of these other stories and kind of a general shitstorm, I suppose. So Black Myth Wukong came out and sold 10 million copies in its first 3 days of release, which is an insane amount of copies to sell for any game that's not called Pokemon, right? That's not a Nintendo first party game. And even a lot of Nintendo games like Metroid Dread sold 3 million copies. So 10 million copies is a lot of copies. And, what I said in the group chat was the first two parts of the Final Fantasy remake, was it Remake and Rebirth?
Yeah.
I don't think those two games combined have sold 10 million copies yet. So this game from a completely new franchise comes out and sells 10 million copies in the first 3 days. There's been a lot of questions. How does this game sell that well? Particularly because this game, I feel like there was a positive reaction to its trailer, but I didn't feel like there was a whole lot of people staying around going, man, I can't wait to play that Black Myth game. That Wukong game looks amazing. And, so there's been a lot of debate about what's going on with this game. It is a Chinese developed game. It was released in China, which not all video games are. In fact, most video games are not released into China. You have to get a special approval for each individual game to get it released in China. So a lot of the argument has been, well, this is Chinese players responding. They're buying this game in addition to other players around the world. So that's really pushing those numbers higher. But the lead developer of this game has apparently made disparaging, misogynistic comments about women in the past about women playing the game, about having female characters in the game. And so a lot of people are like, hey, this is, have been sort of pitting this against Concord, saying this is what happens when you go woke. This is what happens when you reject that. And so this has been their thing to hold up and champion, right? Like, this is the game that is anti-woke, and look how well it's doing. Look how successful it is. Which is I'll just say, for me personally, it's such a weird thing to bring politics into video games like this, because I feel like most video games, while sometimes can be very political, are just so not political and not so of the moment in the way that we think of film and television, just because of the lead time, right? You spend 5 years developing a game. It can't be about what's going on right now, because you started development 5 years ago on it. So it can be about more broad issues, right? But the games are not commenting on J.D. Vance, because video games did not know that J.D. Vance was going to be a thing 5 years ago when the development started. And I think Concord, development started 8 years ago or something. The game's been under development for a long time. So it's weird when people want to make these games of the moment, and really the stuff they're upset and complaining about and fighting over is more about the developers than the games themselves.
Well, that's kind of, I think there's part of me that always feels gameplay is political, because I grew up being the marginalized game player. Makes it sound super dramatic, but you're comparing developers and you're comparing games of two completely different genres. Wukong's not a live service game. Concord, you're not. This is a complete fallacy to be oh, this is what happens when you're woke versus when you're not. It's just stupid. Why are people stupid? Why are people stupid?
I mean, we've seen similar arguments, right? They just canceled that Star Wars series, The Acolyte, and people have latched onto that, oh, this failed because it was a woman director, and she had a black female character, and
it's I've spent my whole life hearing these things, and I'm so tired.
So when I say games aren't political, I mean more they're not political of the moment, generally speaking, unless they're really bizarre, like Wolfenstein 2, which was far more of the moment than the developers could have ever imagined it was going to be when they were making it. But, games, certainly the Metal Gear series is very political.
Yeah.
But it's more kind of broad, right? It's not talking about, again, J.D. Vance. It's not talking about Kamala Harris.
It's not Watchmen and Dark Knight Returns having Reagan still be president.
Right.
Yeah.
So
people are stupid. Why are people stupid?
Yeah. So I wanted to tie this into the third story here, because, man, what a weird week it's been. Bungie has fired the now former director of the Marathon game, another live service game, after misconduct allegations from female staff. So we should say these are alleged misconduct, but that this included making sexual comments to female employees who were working under him as his director, his position as director of this game.
Wish I was surprised.
Yeah, we've talked about this multiple times at multiple different studios, right? This is a problem in the game industry.
Yeah.
We were talking about this today in class, about this goes back to the very earliest days of the video game industry, when there was a hot tub in Atari's offices, and they were bringing women in there and doing drugs with them. And, it was kind of a bizarre frat house sort of environment, and to some degree. So, yeah, I think when you see this, right, like this is why it is so upsetting, right? Like if you're the developer behind Black Myth Wukong, this is why it's so upsetting when you're making these disparaging comments. Not that they're not upsetting on their own, but like this is the real world consequences with not even the broader world, but within the game industry, right? Like even if you're a studio that's only male employees and you're like, we can be like anti wokeness and everything, and we're like doing this in our like own little enclave, so who cares? The outcome of that sort of creating that sort of environment is we end up with this marathon situation where somebody in a director position thinks it's socially acceptable to make sexual remarks to their female subordinates or even their female equals, right?
Yeah, I'm going to say to women in general, and especially, it's this idea that the gamer girl is really just one of the guys, but she has boobs, so I'm just tired. I'm just tired of that. I'm so tired of sexist crap.
Yeah. It continues to paint the industry, and not only the people who are working in it, but I think also the people who enjoy games. It paints the entire industry in a very negative light.
Yeah.
Right? Like this is not healthy for the industry. Like it's morally wrong. But if we take a step back even from that, you look at it and you go, this is not healthy for the game industry.
No, it's the kind of thing that keeps me from, it's the kind of thing that keeps me from getting too invested in new games and new systems anymore. Because I'm like, I've been shoved out of so many spaces that I'm like, well, screw it. I'm just going to stick to the ones that I do like and I haven't gotten shoved out of yet.
Yeah.
Well, and you know that if Marathon ends up flopping, that this is going to get brought up. Like, oh, this is why it ended up flopping, because they blah, 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 blah.
Because they fired him.
Well, the word is that Marathon is in bad shape and that it was in bad shape before he left.
Mm-hmm. I wonder why.
Yeah. Can't imagine.
Sounds like a great place to work.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a very good lesson, right? When you create a hostile workplace,
mm-hmm.
and even if you're not the direct target of that hostility, right? There's a lot of men working there who are not the target, that this is a very uncomfortable, unhappy place to be working.
Yeah.
And, if nothing else, because your female colleagues are unhappy and uncomfortable. And, like Alicia, when you're unhappy about video games for this reason, not when you're just unhappy about a game you don't like, but when you're unhappy for something like this, it makes me less happy.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and
that's because you're a good person.
Well, but like
I'm sorry. I'm very bitter and cynical on this, where I'm like, there are also probably there are guys who are unhappy because their female coworkers are unhappy. There are also guys who are happy because they're like, yeah, look at our director go. And that's me being bitter and cynical.
What? No, I think that's true. I think there are guys who very much buy into that. But my point being, like you were saying, Mario, that it creates a bad workplace.
Yeah.
Right. Even for the men who aren't the target of it.
Yeah.
Plus, you're losing. Right. Women are 51% of the population. You are losing out on 51% of the talent. Plus, the men who are like, I can't work at this place. This place is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
You're losing out on them. So, like, you are doing a brain drain by allowing this to happen. Even outside of the moral, ethical issues of
Yeah.
this.
If you can't look at it from a moral standpoint, what about from a money standpoint? Can you look at it that way and still realize that you're screwing up?
Well, but I think that's the pitch to corporations.
Yeah.
About
Oh no, it absolutely is.
Yeah, I mean, like corporations are inherently immoral
Yeah.
because they aren't, contrary to what the Supreme Court says, corporations aren't people. They have no morality. So, like, how do you pitch this to a corporation? Well, like, this hurts your bottom line.
Yeah.
And so, like, yeah, it's very upsetting. It's not a news story. We have talked about this a lot at multiple different places, Activision, and quite a few others. But it's sad every time we have to talk about it. I feel like it's worth talking about because, like, if you don't talk about it, you're just kind of sweeping it under the rug and pretending it's not happening.
Yeah.
But it's not the happy news we want to talk about. I do want to talk about this story because this is the most bizarre story.
This is so bizarre.
And I want people to go read this story because it's fantastic reporting and it's the most bizarre story I've read all week. And this is a week, again, where J.D. Vance and Trump are out doing things. So, it's bizarre. Did you see that J.D. Vance video where he was at the donut shop?
I did.
And it's like he's never interacted with another human being in his life.
Well, I think the thing that was so funny was, he was introduced himself like, I'm running for vice president of the U.S. And the lady there's just like, okay. What do you want?
Well, it was like he came off like the crazy person who's in McDonald's going, I'm a pirate. And you're like, okay, please go away. Leave me alone.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So, sorry to get political there for a moment, but like in a week of like really crazy stuff, this is maybe the craziest story. IGN has published an expose about the game disability advocate, Susan Banks, stating that Susan Banks may have never been real. So Susan Banks' supposed partner had posted on social media that she had passed away, and Banks had apparently been a very vocal voice on social media, pushing for more representation of disabled people, but also accessibility in games for people with disabilities. And apparently might not have ever been a real person. It sounds like from this story that her partner might have created her and entirely made her up, including other social media posters that were interacting with her, might have also been made up by this person. It is one of the most bizarre stories you'll ever read.
This is like, I'm just skimming this right now, and this is like giving me PTSD flashbacks to HIV living on Tumblr, and like how that was a complete hoax. Just, what even? What even?
I mean, it feels like the sort of thing in, 6 months or a year, you're going to see a documentary about this on Netflix.
Yeah, it's actually, it is a really, so like this isn't the first time that sock puppets have been used for whatever purposes online, but it just every time it happens, I'm probably going to deep dive into this over this weekend and be like, what? I'm probably going to end up watching like 4 hours of video essays on this because sock puppeting is so interesting in a horrifying way. And yeah, and
I'm very much compressing this story, and the reason why I even bothered to bring it up, I want people to go read this because I think it's good journalism. I think it's really well done by IGN. I think they should be rewarded by people like visiting the site and them getting the additional hits and everything from it. It's not really a story we can like delve into all the details of it here in even in a 2-hour podcast, I feel like. But
I feel like this could be a whole 2-hour podcast,
Yeah.
just this story.
But it's a wild story. And I think people should go check it out because, what is wrong with people?
Unraveling sock puppets online is always such a journey, and this is wild.
Yeah, so let's stop there with the news because I feel like we've those last few stories have been very exhausting. Let's move on to our big question of the week because I feel like that can be a little bit more fun for all of us. So we talked a lot about sort of retro classic compilations that were releasing that got announced. Obviously the Castlevania, the Tetris, the Capcom fighting games.
Did we just call the Nintendo DS retro?
It is. You're old. Accept it.
This is the part where I shrivel up and go in a corner and die.
Retro has been defined as over 10 years old, and the DS is over 10 years old.
Screaming.
That means we're getting close to like the Switch being retro. Like 3 more years.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah, I mean, look, the Switch could be the first game console to be retro while it's still
current gen.
Yeah, but still the primary console of the company.
Only Nintendo.
I mean, it is their longest running console at this
Yeah.
point. It's outlived the Game Boy at this point. So, yeah, I would love to see Nintendo just say fuck it and like make a run for it. Like
Switch 2, not happening. Enjoy the Switch for another 3 years.
we're gonna
And
do
honestly,
it, guys.
All right.
I'll say I'd be fine with that. Gives me
As long
3
as you're
years.
putting new stuff out for it, that's fine.
Gives me 3 years to get a real job and make more money than a grad student does.
I think they're starting to hit that wall, unfortunately, right? Like I think they're starting to see their own limitations. Those Pokemon games are being held together by like rubber bands at this point. So the big question, lots of retro collections. What games would you like to see a collection of? So this can be a particular series, maybe a genre, even like a full console. Maybe games on a theme, like horror games or something. If Christina was here, I'm sure we'd have a horror game compilation from her.
Yeah.
But is there something that you would really like to see? So, Mario, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I mean, now that you've given us more leeway for how this can work, at first I was going to say, I don't think this could ever work because all the different games were made by so many different developers. But even such, I think like a collection of those James Bond games would be pretty cool. So you've got like GoldenEye and The World Is Not Enough on the N64. And then that next generation of the GameCube, Xbox, PlayStation 2 had like Nightfire and From Russia with Love and Agent Under Fire. And I think the majority, if actually not all of those, that era were all made by EA. But
I think they were.
I think that would be a fun collection. I think you could throw in some of like, if you could expand it out, all of like the very old classic, like point and click style ones as well. I think that as a character, James Bond as a character, for understandable reasons, doesn't get connected to video games a ton. But I mean, GoldenEye is one of the most influential games, I think, of all time. I think I don't have any hesitation in saying that. And so I think something that would be like a James Bond collection would be cool.
Yeah, I think that could be really cool. I mean, most of those games are first-person shooters because after GoldenEye, everybody thought, well, we have to recreate that experience. But some of them aren't. Like they made, I forget which one it is. They made one that's like just a driving game.
That I don't know.
That might be on the original PlayStation. So it's like just primarily a driving game. It's a James Bond driving game, which is like bizarre when you think about it. Because there's driving parts in those movies, but it's not what you think of when you think of James Bond. And I feel like there was a cartoon series that was like James Bond Jr.
There's a SNES game of James Bond Jr.
That's what I was about to say.
It's
I think
like
there's
considered historically bad, but
but
there is a game.
There's a game of that is what I was thinking. So that would be.
I guess I'll amend that. The first level is like notorious. The rest of the game I think is fine. but the first level is not like any of the rest of the game, but is like notoriously bad.
Okay. I actually know nothing about that game. I think I've maybe seen something of it once, right? And so, yeah, it would be all the more reason to include that, right?
Sure.
In there. So that would be interesting. Yeah, it'd be interesting to compare all those first-person shooters because, like, why could they not recreate that formula of GoldenEye? Because they were desperately trying. There even is that GoldenEye.
Yeah, they did like a remake of it on Wii or something like that.
Right, but it's not actually.
Yeah, I never played it, but it's like a remake, but not actually.
Yeah.
I think the best way of putting it.
Yeah, so, all right. Alicia, how about you?
It's funny you mentioned the Pokemon games being held together with rubber bands because I'm like, I want a retro collection of like Gen 1 and Gen 2 Pokemon, and not Fire Red and Leaf Green, not Heart Gold and Soul Silver. I want the original janky, horrifying sprites held together with duct tape and dreams. I want blue version and red version and gold and silver and crystal. I want those back. I don't care how bad they are objectively. I acknowledge that I'm wearing rose-tinted glasses and I'm okay with that.
That's one that surprises me we haven't gotten because Nintendo seems, or Pokemon Company, seem unwilling to put those on Nintendo Online.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like, are they holding them out? Like the launch of the Switch 2, like, are they going to put them out then?
I hope so, because that has been something that's driven Pokemon fans insane.
Right.
Like every time that they announce, one of the random, like Pokemon Pinball coming to Nintendo
Right.
Switch Online, we're like, when are you giving us the Gen 1 and Gen 2 games?
They put the
and even
card
Gen 3
game
at this point. Like,
They put the card game on there. They put Pokemon Stadium.
yeah.
It's just not the actual games.
It's like, where? We want them. We'll pay you for them even. Just give them to us.
Well, that's what I was going to say. So, like, if they're not going to put them out on Switch Online because they think there's money to be made, then why not do that? Why not do a collection? Even if you did it like Gen 1 collection, right?
Yeah.
So red, blue, and yellow.
Yeah.
Like, and then, do a Gen 2 collection and everything.
I would
fans
buy
would-
each and every one of them.
Well, I was about to say, Pokemon fans would buy those.
Yeah. I'm a poor grad student and I would buy each and every one.
So it seems like an obvious thing, which makes me even more confused why they're not doing it. And that doesn't seem like something that would cut into the sales of any remakes, right? Like,
Right. No, because everyone acknowledges the significant differences between the originals and the remakes that they've done.
The only thing I could think of potentially getting in the way of, and I think this is purely speculation, I assume they'll do it at some point, but again, it's speculation, would be if they were to do that for Gen 2 and if they were to do like a Let's Go of Gen 2.
sure.
I think that's
Yeah.
the only thing, but even that, the Let's Go games are also significantly different enough that,
Yeah.
but I don't know, like that's about as much as I could think of potentially getting in the way.
Yeah. Well, and even that, because I think you're right. I think they are probably going to do a Let's Go
Johto.
Johto. I forget what people were theorizing it was going to be. I think it was like Let's Go Togepi and Let's Go Wooper. I think people were theorizing.
Let's go, Whooper.
Yep. Just a little guy.
I want to see that on a store shelf.
But it's like, yeah, okay, release that and release a collection of Gen 1. And then after that, Johto one's been out for a while. That Johto Let's Go. Then release Gen 2. Then
Yeah.
That'd be so easy. Nintendo, please.
Yeah, it feels like they must have either something that's inhibiting them or there's a plan.
Yeah.
Like to have held off on those this long, it feels like they must have some idea of what they're doing. Then again, it's Nintendo, and Nintendo sometimes I feel like has no idea what they're doing. They're just playing it by ear.
Yeah.
And it might also just be the different companies that are all involved because,
Right.
I don't know, is Game Freak still, I don't know if that still even exists. Are they still part of the Pokemon, the development of those games?
Yeah.
So I don't know.
I'll
If,
say I think it's probably something's inhibiting them from doing it, whether that's Game Freak or the Pokemon Company But nonetheless, I continue to dream.
I mean, I guess one issue is they do have to worry about oversaturation of the market. Like where is the time slot that you put that out? And like this fall would have made a whole lot of sense because there's nothing Pokemon coming out this fall that I can think of.
Yeah.
And there hasn't been anything this year, right? Like nothing Pokemon has been released this year. And like last year we did get stuff. We got Pokemon Snap and other things.
Not that I can think of off the top of my head.
I say, I don't think, because the most recent release was the DLC, and that was last December. I guess we have the mobile game coming up for the card game.
Oh,
okay.
And I think that's coming out this year still, but
I think Legends Pizza is supposed to be coming out next year.
Well, I mean, I know that is an issue that, like they're running into with the Zelda games, right? Like, so people keep wanting that Wind Waker and Twilight Princess remakes for the Switch, or not remakes, remasters that they had put on the Wii U, ported over. And the issue with that seems to be, when do they release that something else Zelda is not coming out? Mm-hmm. Right? Like, so we have that new Zelda game.
Echoes of Wisdom, is it?
Right.
So it's like in 2 weeks or something like that.
Yeah.
It's this month. And it's September, I mean.
I thought I was going to say the 15th. I think it's actually like the 28th, but it is sometime in September.
Yeah.
But like, anyways, so like I get, when do you put those out when you're not competing with another Zelda game?
Yeah.
So like maybe next year, like I don't know if we'll get a Zelda game next year. So maybe next year would make sense for that. So with Pokemon, I can see that being an issue. Like you have so many Pokemon games in development, the remakes and the
Legends game.
the Legends games and the new generation games. So like Pokemon Snap and stuff like that. So at some point you're running into an issue of when do we fit in a new Pokemon game?
Yeah. Well, because I'm fairly confident that whenever Switch 2 comes, that remakes of Black and White will be launch titles for that. It'll be interesting to see if they combine and just sell one game for Black 1 and 2 and White 1 and 2, or if they do separate remakes for those. But
if it's Nintendo, they're going to do whatever makes them the most money. So
there is that.
All right. So my answer is, I believe we are coming up. We are coming up fairly soon. Well, I guess it's not fairly soon, but it won't be too long that we'll come up on the 50th anniversary of the Commodore 64 and its release. And there's such a wide variety and diverse slate of games for that system, and it lasted so long. There's a system that lasted over a decade. I would really love to see, Digital Eclipse do a collection. I've actually suggested this to Mike Micah on social media. And I would love to see them do a collection of those games. Like give me Bruce Lee on there. Give me, the Beachhead games. Give me a lot of those old games into a collection with the like historical context around them. I understand that's probably a little hard to sell for some people, but it can't be any harder than the Jeff Minter story. And, that's amazing that they made that. And this would, I think, also be amazing to see them put out and, give that system the due that it's deserved, not just from old people like me, but like maybe some young people would also enjoy it.
That does sound pretty cool.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Yeah, I mean, they did it for Atari. That was fantastic. So, like, seeing that done for systems, we're getting to the point now where systems are, coming up on 50th anniversaries, which is kind of a bizarre thing to think about, or 45th anniversaries or whatever it might be. Mm-hmm. I guess we actually are coming up on the 50th anniversary of the Atari 2600. Like, that'll be in 3 more years, which is wild to think about. All right, that does it for this week's show. So thank you to Mario and Alicia, or Alissa, or however you say your name. Thank you for those of you who are listening. You can check out old episodes and other content at salukigames.com. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts or something, like leave us a review, hopefully a very positive review that helps other people find the podcast. And we will be back next week. Seems like it. We're on a weekly schedule all of a sudden, which is kind of weird after our summer break and everything to think about.
That's what happens when the semester starts again.
Yeah, you start getting more of this podcast, like it or not. But we'll be back soon. Thanks for listening. Enjoy your week. Play something cool, and we'll talk to you later.